Let me take you back to the year 2005. The first ever YouTube video is uploaded and it's called Me at the Zoo. The Airbus A380 has taken its maiden flight and Microsoft has released Xbox 360. And here in India, Maruti has launched a new car and it's this, the original first gen Swift.
The world that we lived in at the time wasn't ready for this car. It had the looks, a good quality cabin, a powerful engine, and a fun chassis.
It's almost as if Maruti heard the prayers of the enthusiast. It was just so good. Six years later, we got the second gen Swift. Now, this car had everything which made the OG Swift such a sweet car to drive. But that's the thing, this didn't offer anything over and above the original Swift, which I think is not a great family car. I mean, it didn't have a lot of space at the back and the boot was also quite small. I think this was the weak link. We are now in 2018 and at this point Maruti has redeemed itself big time with this, the third gen Swift. Now this still wasn't the most spacious or the most comfortable thing in the world, but it had way more features than before.
It also had more space at the back, a bigger boot, and for the first time, an automatic option for both petrol and diesel versions.
It didn't matter if you were fresh out of college or someone with kids. This particular Swift was the perfect small car for anyone. I mean, it was as much fun as the original car, but this time around, you had a lot more space and nice features to live with. As far as I am concerned, the Swift is the second most influential car that Maruti Suzuki has made, after the SS80 of course. But here's the thing, after such a memorable lineage, how could the new 2024 Swift possibly rewrite the hatchback rulebook the way the original did? Rewriting the hatchback rulebook is a big ask because let me tell you already, this new Swift, well on paper at least, it may not seem as impressive as the old car. Now I say that because it's down on power and one whole cylinder compared to the K series engine in the earlier Swift. But on the other hand, this car has got a completely new suspension setup, more features inside, and this new design, which I must say looks much better in the flesh than in pictures. So it's a proper evolution overall, no doubt about that. But is this new Swift as much fun to drive? And does it have the DNA of the Swift as we know it? Well, let's find out.
This new model certainly has the Swift DNA with the way it looks. Despite all the changes, it is still recognizable as a Swift, but the genius here is that Maruti has completely redesigned things that you would want to look at the most. So the headlights, the taillights, the bonnet and the alloys, they all come with a new look. All of these changes amount to a car that looks fresh and at the same time quite familiar, which isn't a bad thing at all because the Swift has always been a good looking hatchback. In terms of dimensions, the Swift is hardly different. It's ever so slightly longer than before, but the width is still the same and so is the wheelbase. Even the track lengths are identical.
Inside the cabin of the new Swift, and let me begin by telling you everything that has come from the old car. So this flat bottom 3-spoke steering wheel, the chunky manual gear lever, and this entire switch gear for the electric mirrors and the window switches, well, it's come from the old Swift. But apart from these, everything else that you will see in this cabin is either new or borrowed from more expensive Marutis.
The 9-inch infotainment system, for instance, is from the Fronx and the display for it has moved up. It isn't integrated within the dashboard like in the old car. Similarly, the climate control panel is from the Baleno, the Fronx and the Brezza. What's entirely new though is the layering on the dashboard and the look for the AC vents.
Speaking of the new look and feel that the Swift now has, well, it's not something that will make you go wow. And if I'm honest, this cabin is not jam packed with new age features either. So, stuff like surround view cameras, heads up display, or a sunroof, you don't get any of that. But you have to hand it to Maruti on execution, because whatever you get, it works perfectly fine. There are no bugs on this infotainment system, there are no rough edges anywhere on this cabin, the controls feel good to use, and if I'm honest, in general, the fit and finish is pretty solid. Now, if you're looking to buy the new Swift, especially in this most expensive ZXi Plus variant, then here are some things we have observed so far that you must know.
The mini display on the instrument cluster is from other Maruti models. However, the analog dials are fully new and they do look really good. The rear door handles are back in the conventional position with this new Swift. They are no longer positioned high up next to the C-pillar. All variants of the Swift now come with 6 airbags, ESP and hill hold as standard. The ZXi variant gets wireless everything, be it Android Auto, Apple CarPlay or phone charging. The middle passenger at the back gets a 3-point seatbelt but no headrest. Finally, new features for the rear occupants include AC vents at the back and phone charging options. You get both Type A and Type C USB ports. What's slightly disappointing though is that the Swift still doesn't get a rear armrest or a new design for the key fob. It's the same old design that we have been seeing for years.
The Swift hasn't grown in any way. Okay, so it's a tinge longer than before, but that's because of the bumper design. Otherwise, the width of the car is the same and so is the wheelbase, which means the new Swift is fairly comfortable for two people at the back. I'm 5'8" and there is more than enough headroom for someone my size, but legroom is pretty okay. It's not great, and under thigh support is also just about adequate. So if you want more space, then you will have to spend more money and get the Baleno, which somehow has that big hatchback-like feel, which is something that's missing in the new Swift. I'm pretty sure I'm not wrong when I say that for a lot of people who actually enjoy driving, the Swift was the first affordable car that they fell in love with for the way it drove. All three generations before this car, well, they've all had a willing engine, a lovely chassis, and a sense of connection that sometimes made you want to jump into the Swift and drive it just for fun and no other reason whatsoever.
For the 4th Gen Swift, Maruti has introduced a brand new engine. It's a 3-cylinder Z-series engine that powers the Swift not only in India but also Japan and Europe. It's an entirely new naturally aspirated engine that will eventually power other Maruti hatchbacks like the Baleno and the Fronx.
Let me tell you straight away, this engine isn't a powerhouse in any way. In fact, it's around 8 horsepower less than before, but you don't always need a powerful engine for a car to be fun, right? We'll get to the fun bit later. For now, all you need to know is that this new 3-cylinder engine has a very different character when compared to the 4-cylinder KA series engine that the old Swift had.
Of course, it's got character. A good engine needs to have a character, needs to make good power, and it has to sound nice even if it's powering a mundane hatchback.
Now, I'm not saying that the new Swift is mundane to drive or something. It's actually far from it. And remember I said that this engine has got a very different character. Well, it's got a nice spread of torque lower down the rev range and around the mid-range. And you know what? You'll feel that every single time you drive this car within the city limits and in traffic, doing the sorts of speeds that you would normally do when living with the Swift.
Unlike the K series engine, which would make most of its power at the top end, around 5000 rpm and above, this new 3-cylinder unit has been tuned in such a way that it feels slightly more potent below 4000 rpm, even though it's making 8 horsepower less.
The sweet spot here is between 2000 and 4-ish thousand RPM, which I believe is the sort of rev range that you and I would mostly end up using on an everyday basis. All in all, for this segment and for the kind of weight that the Swift carries, the amount of power that this engine makes is more than acceptable. Of course, a turbo would be always welcome, but that still doesn't take away the fact that this new Swift is plenty involving to drive. It's also down to the 5-speed manual gearbox that we have here. Now this is such a good manual gearbox. The gear shifts are precise and the gears are also very well defined.
Now for reference, here's how the new 2024 Swift performs in a 0 to 100 kmph acceleration test when compared to the 2023 model with the 4-cylinder engine.
Maruti has put a new hydraulic clutch this time around with this gearbox for it to be easier to engage and disengage the clutch for a variety of drivers. Now the end result is that this is a really light clutch pedal. In fact, it's one of the lightest clutch pedals that I've ever experienced, and it is a good thing. But the thing is that there is no real bite point to this clutch pedal anymore, and if you ask me, that takes away some amount of fun out of the equation. Overall though, this 5-speed manual unit is a solid gearbox and it complements this new 3-cylinder engine pretty well.
There are more changes to report beyond the all-new engine. These include different spring rates, more suspension travel, and different settings for the dampers. The motive here is to make the Swift a much nicer car to live with in terms of ride comfort. In reality, the ride quality is just as forgiving and comfortable as the old car. The only difference that we would notice is that it's slightly quieter this time around and you don't hear the suspension load up that much when driving over layered roads with sharp edges. In conclusion, the new Swift is a car that we would continue to recommend to anyone looking for an all-purpose hatchback with some character. After all, there has never been a bad Swift since 2005, and we are happy to conclude that this 4th gen model has upheld the Swift's DNA. Okay, so it's not as affordable as it used to be, but it's still good value because it has improved on every USP of the 3rd gen model, be it features, handling, comfort, and engine. Yes, the engine is way more impressive than how it seems on paper. It's an engine that you may appreciate only after experiencing it like we did. That's all from us from this video. Let us know if you're planning to test drive the new Swift or if you have driven it already and noticed something that we haven't covered in this review.